President of Sri Lanka India Society, Mr. Kishore Reddy, the rest of the executive board here at SLIMFA, and welcome to all our media friends and other dignitaries who are present here today. It's my privilege to be the host today on this special occasion of the inaugural session of the newly formed Sri Lanka India Media Friendship Association. And to commemorate this occasion, I request our keynote speaker, Mr. Chengappa, the President of SLIMFA, Mr. Mishta Qasim, First Secretary, Indian High Commission, Navya Singla, Chairman, Sri Lanka Press Institute, Mr. Kumar Nadesan, Manager, Corporate Communications, Sri Lankan Airways, Deepal Parera, Area Director, Taj Maldives and Sri Lanka and GM Taj Samudra, Samrat Datta. Please come up and light the ceremonial oil lamp. May I also request Mr. Kishore Reddy from Sri Lanka India Society to join and light the ceremonial lamp. A traditional and an official start to SLIMFA activities in Sri Lanka. Let's all now be upstanding for the national anthems of Sri Lanka and India.
जनगणमन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
I now invite the President of Sri Lanka India Media Friendship Association, Mr. Mr. Qasim, to address all of us.
Good morning, Ayubowan and Namaste. It is my great pleasure to welcome every one of you for the inaugural event of the newly established Sri Lanka India Media Friendship Association. It's good to give us a brief introduction of the association because this is very new. It comprises journalists who have been to India and familiarization visits or other programs supported by the Government of India. It was formed to promote exchanges between the media fraternity, enhance awareness of contemporary India, foster research and reporting on India-Sri Lanka partnership, promote new ideas for greater people-to-people ties, and also support capacity building. The patron is the High Commissioner of India in Sri Lanka, His Excellency Santosh Jha, and the advisor is the Head of the Press, Information and Culture Wing of the Indian High Commission. Today we have the presence of the Head of the Wing, First Secretary Ms. Navya Singla. Today's event is also part of the bilateral Bharat-Sri Lanka Maitri Week, which began on Monday and ends tomorrow, commemorating India's 78th Independence Day. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning's forum is timely and the subject matter is relevant to our profession. To put it in context, the recent 2024 elections in India was the largest democratic exercise in history, and it was the most expensive in the world. In Sri Lanka, we are bracing for a presidential election with a record 39 candidates. So, we are fortunate and honored to have the distinguished presence of the highly respected and award-winning Indian editor, Mr. Chengappa, to share his perspective on Indian elections and of course the media. His keynote and the discussion to follow will help the Sri Lankan media to better understand and perform its due role in the coming days. For making this event possible, we are grateful to you, Mr. Chengappa, our valued panelist, our patron, the Indian High Commission, and the forum strategic partners, the Taj Samudra Colombo, especially the Taj Sri Lanka, the Maldives Area Director, Ms. Lata, and Sri Lankan Airlines, Deepal, Deepal, all the invitees, and of course my executive board. Going forward, the association hopes to conduct similar events, taking different and timely and relevant themes under the broader title of media matters, thereby adding value to the broader media community and Indo-Lankan relations. We will continue to engage with all stakeholders and seek their advice and support. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us celebrate and benefit from today's historic event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Now on to the real media matter for the day. And may I start by introducing our keynote speaker for the day, Mr. Raj Chengappa. Raj Chengappa is an award-winning journalist of over 40 years standing. He's currently the Group Editorial Director Publishing of the India Today Group and editor of India Today magazine. Prior to his current assignment, Raj was editor-in-chief of the Tribune Group of newspapers. Raj has varied interests and is a specialist in political analysis, foreign affairs, national security, nuclear weapons, the environment, and development. He also does a weekly podcast and a YouTube show for India Today, called Nothing But the Truth. Widely traveled, he has interviewed a range of national leaders, including Indian Prime Ministers Narendra Modi, Dr. Manmohan Singh and P.V. Narasimha Rao, and international leaders including Russian President Vladimir Putin, French President Emmanuel Macron, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Pakistan President Pervez Musharraf, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, Afghanistan President Hamid Karzai, and Sri Lankan Presidents Chandrika Kumaratunga and Mahinda Rajapaksa. An award-winning journalist, Raj was a Nieman Fellow at Harvard University in 91-92, a Stimson Center Fellow on Security Affairs in Washington, D.C. in 1995, and a Harry Britton Fellow partly at London and Oxford University in 1985. May I please request Raj to come and give us
Morning everyone, and delighted to be here. Mr. Cousin, thank you very much for bringing me here. Santosh Menon for that wonderful intro, which I'm sure I'm not going to live up to. Navya for making all these wonderful arrangements from the High Commission side, Taj Group and everybody else part of this that has made my stay very, very comfortable. And let me say what a privilege it is to be here. I got up this morning, looked out at the sea, at the Gulf front, I think that's what it's called, and listen to the roar of the ocean. And it's 15 years, I must say, that I actually had missed of it. And the last time I came was 2009, in the thick of a turning point in the history of Sri Lanka, May 2009, which all of you are familiar with, and to come back again at another major turning point, at the crossroads of history again. And the elections to be held and the outcome of it, I think, is as important as what happened to us in 2024 in India. Just to say that my association with Sri Lanka, and I was just thinking this morning, how far back was it that I sort of got involved in reporting Sri Lanka? And my first instance was we are storytellers, right? I hope you don't mind if we do a little bit of storytelling. Well, my first instance was when I just joined India Today at that time as a correspondent, and I got a call. Those days it was all trunk call, right? No cell phones, no nothing. You worked with typewriters. Cut and paste came from a typewriter. You actually cut the paper and then pasted it so the centers, and that has of course stayed on with computers that you do the same thing. We sent telegrams. We used teleprinter. We never had any of these modern devices. So I got this call to say that there's been a Sinam. The Sri Lankan intelligence had said their last Sinam was many, no one had ever photographed him, I'm told. Because I went and somehow got an information as to what time he would come at the court. I stood on top of that and I photographed Prabhakaran in handcuffs. And I can still remember when he saw me up, this was the Egmore court, and I've never seen someone so ferociously angry. He literally did this and looked at me, and I almost dropped my camera. I didn't know who he was, and he was, at that time, just as I said. And then subsequently, the entire Sri Lankan intelligence was after me to give the photograph, and I said, it's in India Today, so there's nothing to it. So that was my first encounter, and simultaneously, very strangely enough, the whole issue of refugees moving into the Mandapam camp in Tamil Nadu, and the fishermen issue Again, Kachetu, of course, is back in the news for all the wrong reasons at this time. But I did go across with the fishermen over there to see this island that was at that time just, I think, conceded to Sri Lanka. So my initiation in journalism also began very much in the process of it. And for some reason or the other, the entire civil war sort of trailed me wherever I was going. I was doing other things. I got very interested, as I can see in my range of interest was, I thought politics had become a little boring or too easy to do because you went backslapping arrangements and with all the politicians. I used to cover the South as correspondent, so all the 4 states I could call up and meet any of the chief ministers I wanted to. So I said this is not a challenge, and I did a lot of environment and rural reporting. I wanted to understand India, the vast country it is, and so for the next 8-9 years, I just spent time going to villages, looking at all the key issues, food, agriculture, health. No one wanted to write about this. All of the, as you know, journalists who write in politics are in the forefront and generally get all the things, but journalists who do the development work looks like these chaps are, down the hierarchy. No one ever thought you could become an editor if you covered development issues, right? But that was critical in the country, I felt. And strangely enough, the trail of Prabhakaran also sort of followed me because the IPKF happened, and subsequently the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi and the entire investigation and the prosecution. I had to go for that. So that was the next time I had to again listen to the entire evidence that was mounted against Prabhakaran and try and understand what was happening in Sri Lanka. And to move fast forward, I mean, this is things kept happening at various times. The next time I came was when Prabhakaran had started what is called those days Operation Unceasing Waves after Riverissa, after Chandrika Kumaratunga had done the entire range of pushing him back, and then he captures Mullaitivu and the entire battle shifts, and that is the time that the entire Kumaratunga and Chandrika had come down at that particular time, and I do remember meeting Ranil Wickramasinghe at that time. He was the opposition leader, and he said that she had called it the war for peace. For all of those who remember that period that was there, and he said she could neither do war or get peace in this, and that was his comment. And next time I met Chandrika Kumaratunga, and so she said his handling of the entire issue was horrendous, and so there was this very interesting thing that was going on simultaneously with reporting Prabhakaran, and then he called us for a press conference at Kilonichi. Where for the first time he had Z-type security and the entire process of him talking, and he was on the defensive when the Indians were obviously very upset with the way Rajiv Gandhi assassination, and that was not going to be forgiven easily. But he made his point of view, and then of course Mr. Wickramasinghe also was negotiating very, and then Mahinda Rajapaksa. And again, fast forward, I don't want to keep you'll all live through this. It just happened that I had tracked him so closely that I also had to report his death. So in May 2009, when he was killed in the jungles, wherever, I mean, the mystery of that death is still to be, I think, fully as how it happened, what happened. These are things that I'm sure you all will investigate and find out. Whatever was put out at that time, we reported. But that was the time I met all the key players again, whether it was Mahinda Rajapaksa, General Sarat Fonseca, as well as Gotabaya. So these were the key players at that time, and to recreate and see what really happened, understand the strife, and that was another turning point. So since then I've tracked Sri Lanka, but not on ground at events, so I'm back here. So with that short introduction, let me get down to the business at hand, which is really to talk about, look, I found it a bit surprising that you all should want to listen to me, because I think you all cover elections very well. There's no need to learn anything from us. I think this is, just a way of exchanging notes with each other rather than me sitting in the podium and talking about any of these things. You'll do a brilliant job since I've been here so often in terms of coverage. I understand Sri Lanka media, the vibrancy of that media, their push for stories and the way they do things. This is quite amazing. So I'll just give a few points that I thought would be of interest in the way we did things. India Today is, of course, for those who may not know, is one of the largest media conglomerates in India. We are now close to 50 years old. This is our 49th year of publication of India Today. It's the flagship magazine. Our last readership done was 16 million. And of course now everything goes on digital, so we have a very large digital platform. We are one of the top 3 English channels, the #1 Hindi channel across. And we've got multiple channels, which we've got small little channels across for each state, each of the 28 states. So we're very, very strong. And if you look at the elections itself, and I was just trying to come, I've been chatting yesterday to various people, and it's fascinating the kind of parallels we could see with what is happening out here versus what happened in India. And for those, many of you all know it, that there is no comparison in terms of size. Right? We have a voting population of 968 million. That's the latest count in 2024, of which 70%, that's 70% of the population, 18 years and above. And the turnout this time was 66%. So we're looking at 642 million. So if you look at the Sri Lankan comparison, I think we have 21 million. So we have I think we have a very high percentage of voting. That's close to about 17 to 18 million people that are doing it. And if you just do a little comparison across the states, Tamil Nadu by itself has 62.3 million. So you're looking at many, many countries when we are reporting India in that sense, the size in terms of the size, as well as the fact that it is so heterogeneous in its approach. Whether every state you cross, whether my wife comes from Tamil Nadu, I come from Karnataka, I don't speak her language and she doesn't speak mine, right? It's like that. And as you go that side, you have Maharashtrians, you have on my border, people who speak Telugu and Kerala, and it's impossible to learn all the languages. And as you go up, you have Bihari and you've got Hindi and Gujarati, and so it's multiple languages, which is very difficult to really cover with the kind of focus and depth that you can if you're a single journalist. So you need multiple people right across that thing. And if you look at the way we went about it, I just brought a few slides. I didn't want to sort of bore you on with that. Do I just touch a button here that turns it? This is forward. Right. Okay. I just want to context it a little bit quickly. And I brought India Today magazine because I think in many senses it sums up, it represents the kind of coverage that we do. The group also does its own kind of coverage in terms of each one of them is then translated into digital videos. Our TV channels do a very vibrant job of it. Now, why I put this particular event is that was in many senses thought to be the turning point of the election when the huge India alliance that had come together to challenge the BJP had begun to collapse. And the collapse happened when Nitish Kumar, one of the prime movers of that, had moved, who was the chief minister of Bihar, had moved back to BJP. And it was seen and felt that the BJP was on its way of winning. And so that is one of the things that we sort of had to record at that time. So coverage actually began much earlier than the actual elections. This happened in February. One of the turning points of the election is considered this. If the BJP hadn't done this, they would have been in a far worse position than what they are now. They are still bad, they haven't got a full majority, but they would have dropped even further and we might have had a different kind of coverage. So this was one of the events. How you all cover it, how the parallels are there, you'll need to work out who's shifting alliances here, what's happening at the last minute, and this is one of the master strokes that they did. And if you go a little ahead, this is another issue that is engaging everybody, which is election funds. And this is a story that broke by February, which was thought to be another April actually, was thought to be another game changer. Because for the first time, the Supreme Court had rejected the entire electoral bond system, which the government of the Modi government, the central government had introduced in 2017 as a way of preventing the black money and all this unaccounted for money and trying to rationalize it and also to end victimization against businessmen, because the way the fund was constructed, these bonds were constructed, was that corporates would give money in an anonymous account to the State Bank of India, and that would be transmitted to the party concerned. So the entire process is anonymous. except that the SBI would get to know and someone else would get to know. But generally that the feeling was the victimization wouldn't happen. But as the Supreme Court rightly put it, you can't do this. There should be transparency. Everybody should know where the funds are coming from. And very interestingly, I noticed that you have now come out with a law last year. And I'm sure that it will be very interesting for you all to analyze how effective is that law, is it being implemented? There is this whole thing that was passed, I think, in 2023 about election expenditures and what is it. So it's good to get into depth of it. I'm just giving you a broad sweep because we really don't have that much time, and I'd like to, I don't know what my time schedule is when we started, but maybe 5-10 minutes ago we started. So we'll keep to that. By 11 I'll wind up with this thing. So if you look at, that's I think an issue that we really went after. We thought it would be a game changer. Because if you look at the earlier part of it, and I think that's very important, is that you had studies that showed in 2014 as much as 30,000 crores of rupees was being spent on 543 seats, Lok Sabha seats. That's a phenomenal amount. 56 crores per seat was being spent. Can you imagine? I mean, if you translate, if you want a rough idea of how is that, in Sri Lankan rupees, multiply it by 3.5, whatever the exchange rate, 3.5 times. That's the amount of money that is being spent. And only 4,000 to 5,000 were actually accounted by election spending or declarations. So we're getting into the system 25,000 crores without everyone knowing how the system. So the entire system gets corrupted if you don't know, if everyone is putting pressures and pulls and everything else. It's something that we all need to, as democracies, think about. The US tried it. They didn't do much success because the super PACs came in. They then had the entire funding system routed through them, and you know the US elections is being run by how much you get funded. It'll be interesting to see how you all report Sri Lanka's election funding, what is the kind of money and where is it coming from. We found that when the Supreme Court ordered that the collection be made public, the government hummed and hawed, and the election commission and SBI and all said not possible, and then they slammed right down on that, and they came out, and the findings was that between the years March that is 2018 to July 2023, the 5 years, they didn't include July 23 to 24, which might have been much more, because that was the time the general election was also being fought again. And there the number was 30,814 crores that was deposited in these accounts, these bonds as they call it. The BJP had got 55% of that. And the Congress, and that's why things began to get very quiet on this. What should have been an atom bomb for the BJP turned out to be quite a fizz, because the Congress had also taken about 1,500 crores, quite legitimately, no one's saying that, and a whole lot of regional parties, including West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, they were getting 1,000 crores, 900,000 crores. So everybody's hand was in the till, so no one then made a huge fuss about it in terms of, the kind of expenses and the clear sort of direction towards the BJP in terms of funding and whether the government was using pressure. So that is something that we looked at. Then if you go a little more, this was the other big issue that happened in this, and we chose this cover because Prime Minister Modi said that the NDA will get 400 seats, right? 400 par, as he said, which is, I will cross 400 seats. Just to give you a little bit of background, in 2019, the BJP alone, we have a 543 house, so it's logical that our halfway mark is 272, and the BJP had got 303 seats in 2019. And the NDA, which was their alliance partners, had got 353. So he was saying, I'll get 50 seats more this time. Now, this had never been done in recent memory, except in 1984 when Rajiv Gandhi, in the huge wave of sympathy after the assassination of Indira Gandhi, won 414 seats. It was a clear sweep. Now, here was someone who had done 2 terms as Prime Minister, and the BJP was pushing for the most ambitious goal that had not been attained in 40 years to get this in. So we then represented that as in a cover. It's a challenge for all of us, right? So how do we sort of, and this is something that I think the power of the visual. We are one of the best graphic designers and artists that are there in the organization, and he's an award-winning person. So we asked him, and photography, that's also very important. I think newspapers is all about, and magazines and even TV is all about the teamwork. Nothing functions as a Shania player, you know, the soul singer, right? There's a whole orchestra that makes the entire music sound good. And that's very important to understand, that you use all your strengths and leverage all your strengths to convey a message powerfully. I know Santosh here does a lot of image building on this one, and for us it's very important. So we felt that just doing multiple images of Modi told the story. You just have to look at it and you know this is an election that is going to be dominated by Modi, and it's Modi versus the rest. And he put the biggest challenge in retrospect, which began to cut into his votes. But that's how we represented it. And so if you go down, we then we did a further analysis, which is how will the India alliance beat them, right? So we did a twin sort of story, and we called it Can India Topple Modi? And the pun was on India, right? Since they call themselves India, can India defeat Modi? That was the sort of pun that we did. And of course, we represented it in a manner to show that Mr. Modi was the strong man of the whole show, and there was a whole lot of small parties trying to pull him down. And of course, this got a whole lot of debates about our cover. We always get this huge feedback coming in, particularly from Twitter, as to why should we be doing this, we're trying that, and criticism from both sides. But I think that's journalism. When you get criticized by both sides, you're doing something right. That's my sort of analysis of things. So there again, very interestingly, if you looked at it, one of the things to do is how do you start tracking and you know that someone is going wrong. And I was chatting with some of my friends here, you begin to look at the victories and analyze it in depth. So a lot of journalism is also nowadays about getting all the statistics. And all the parties these days have some of the most sophisticated tracking mechanisms. They've outpaced the entire business. So everyone has his own psephologists, their own data crunchers, their own guys who will tell them what constituency. It's like the BJP is actually made it into a phenomenal election machine. I mean, it's the largest party in the world. The amount of money they spend just analyzing every single constituency, every single voter. They've got booth committee voters right to the end of the booth, at the last mile and even the last inch of the of the election booth. They've got people out there. That's the kind of machinery that we're now fighting elections with. I don't know the parallels in Sri Lanka, but it'll be interesting to know. And so if you look at that particular thing, the BJP had won, the NDA had won 283 of its 314 seats in just 13 states. We have 28 states. So the majority, 13 states gave BJP the majority that is there. Now, the BJP therefore had to win a lot more states if it had to cross 400, and it had to hold what it had to keep it at that number that is there, or even just keep it at that. And that's where they began to, if you start looking at it very carefully, they had a certainty rate, and that's also very interesting, because you can do a lot of the number crunching, but finally when it comes to the vote, you never know the voter. When they started the battle in April, at that time, they had in 224 seats, which they won last time, a 50% vote share. Right? Anyone knows that to win 5% more, a swing of 5% is almost an impossibility when it comes to this. So they had started with an advantage of 224 seats. Why I'm telling you that is they finally win 240. So they had this phenomenal advantage, and he was trying to leverage that advantage and say, okay, can I do more of that? And if you examine their thing, and this is where I think it's very interesting to find out, I'm sure you all must be doing this in terms of thing. The Americans have 80 seats out of the 543. Anyone who wins Uttar Pradesh handsomely is almost 1 foot into the door of getting Delhi. Here I would gather you have Colombo district, right, which is one of the, must be 2.4 million voters or something like that, a cakewalk. And that was a mistake they made, and our pollsters also made. They began to assume things in Uttar Pradesh which wasn't really on the ground. Our correspondent was saying, there's no way they are going to get anywhere close to that. The pressure was already building, but no one was listening. And the turning point happened not immediately, but towards the 5th, 6th, and they had 7 rounds. For some reason, the BJP government wanted 7 rounds to go into this election. It was happening before, it's not unusual. But the tide began to turn after after the first two rounds, there was an issue, but as it started moving, the tide was going away from there. And that was the reason, because Uttar Pradesh was coming last. They did Uttar Pradesh in various segments. They divided it into 7 of them. So you had these continuous polls happening there. The other battleground state, which was Maharashtra. And there, Maharashtra gets 48 seats. There was a huge battle which the BJP thought it had won, because when in the last elections, they felt they had been robbed of the mandate because the Shiv Sena ditched them at the last minute. I think this is quite common across the subcontinent, and people are doing it. But the moment the Shiv Sena shifted and formed a state government, they had what is called the Mahavikas Aghadi, which was a united front, development front. And they had 57% of the votes between the what they call Uddhav Thackeray Shiv Sena, the National Congress Party, Nationalist Congress Party, as well as the Congress. So it was an unbeatable combination. The BJP moved in and killed that government. They won over the Shinde's faction. They knocked Uddhav Thackeray out, installed their own government. They went ahead and cynically split the Nationalist Congress Party, because in the retrospective analysis, that began to hurt brand BJP itself, because it was seen as a party that was opportunistic in terms of power, and the ideological standing of a party with a difference began to diminish in the eyes of their own large supporters that were there. That they were playing as much politics as, say, the other parties were doing, something that the BJP has to ponder about when it looks at it. But I'm saying that's a factor that you need to look at when you look at elections, is the image of the leader, the image of the party. Simultaneously here you've got many parties fragmenting, splitting. I can't recognize them. Earlier we had a very easy bicameral system. You knew the UNP and the SLFP, or Freedom Front, SLFP, right? That was it. You reported them. Of course, you had the JVP coming in between, but they were 3%, 4%, so you really never. But the whole thing here also began to fragment very thing, and the BJP thought it had played a masterstroke at that time. But subsequently, this was a state that began to really lose ground. So if you lost ground in Uttar Pradesh, you're losing ground in Maharashtra, you come to the other big state, which is West Bengal. Now, West Bengal has that feisty Mamata Banerjee, who is the chief minister. And there, they had sort of moved wrongly. The West Bengal, apart from the fact that you have a very strong regional leader, I don't know if that phenomenon exists here, but actually it is our regional leaders that have the biggest challenges to Prime Minister Modi and the BJP. If you look across the states, you have Mamata Banerjee in West Bengal. You did have Naveen Patnaik in Odisha, who just lost. You had Nitish Kumar, whom he won over. In Maharashtra, you had Sharad Pawar, who was a major regional force. Of course, the Shiv Sena itself. And as you move south, there were even more, the DMK in Tamil Nadu, in Andhra Pradesh, you had Jagan Reddy with the YSRCP. You had, in this side, KCR was a strong man till recently before he lost out. So there was a whole host of reasons. And of course, Kerala was always lost to the BJP because it had moved very strongly towards either the Congress-led front or the left-developed LDF, which was the left front with the communist parties there. So there were a whole lot of regional forces that were at work. It'd be interesting to find out how many such regional forces are there in Sri Lanka that will turn the battle against a very strong candidate who thinks he's ahead, and how that game is being played. We are watching it very closely. I think the Tamil vote counts a lot, and who's getting it. The religious background vote is also now playing in, and who's going then, and what is happening. So they play out in different ways, but that I think something that we need to keep drilling down to get the truth. You're moving towards how you get a good understanding of what's going to happen and brief your readers or viewers or what, an accurate account, so that when you finally the elections come out, you look credible, you haven't really missed a lot of the things. So if you look at that, and the other big state is, of course, Bihar, 40 seats. And West Bengal, I told you, was 42, where the Muslim card was very, very strong over there, because they have a sizable Muslim population. She had Mamata Banerjee had won them over. And then the entire Hindu or Hindutva politics and the polarization of that electorate began to have its impact on the elections. Now here, I don't know what triggers are there in terms of the communal aspects or the Easter strikes. The church might have a view on that. the Muslims in the Northeast will have their own views on that. What is that factor? It will be very interesting to find out. And I think in that discussion we have after this, we could look at some of these things. All I wanted to say is that if you really look, there are 5 to 6 big states that determine the elections in the direction of the elections, let's not say. In it, and those are, with it comes Tamil Nadu with 39 seats, my home state is 28 seats itself, so between these 6 states it's 277 seats out of the 543. Anyone who wins the majority is almost there in terms of crossing 200 and going on to that path. I was just checking this morning on this thing, and I was checking the populations of each of these cities. You all know it pretty well. Colombo is I think 2.4 million, I'm talking the districts. And 25 districts. And if you look at that, Gampaha is 2.3. Is that the way you pronounce it? Yeah. Okay. And Kurenegala? Yeah, Kurenegala has 1.7 million, Cali is 1.4 million, Ratnapura is 1 million, and Ball is 1 million. So if you add these 7 districts, that's 11 million people by themselves. I would gather that anyone who votes in these districts, and if these are urban districts, then the farm vote may not matter that much. If these are all urbanized and you have so much, so I mean, you all know that permutation calculation, but it's very important that you actually drill down the populations and see, and that's what we did. We said, okay, which are the big swing states? We'll put our resources there, we'll report it in depth. The TV went in, they looked at all the leaders, looked at the ground level truths, whatever was happening in those states was widely reported. Some water. Yeah. And then let's look at the issues. I mean, while we are, let me just. Okay. Thanks. One of the things the BJP could never win was Sri Lanka's immediate neighbor, the southern states, right? And so we did this movie poster kind of thing. Everybody loves the movies, so we had all of them dressed in armor, as it was a classic RRR battle, and the famous Sengal, which was in there, Mr. Modi's holding that. So we made it a little more fun, right? Elections as fun, not necessarily just as serious people. And you have that politicians who can take that sort of a thing, that they all dressed in this kind of, you see Rahul Gandhi, Stalin, all of them. And the idea was that the southern states together are about 132 seats. The BJP never wins, barring in Karnataka, any of these. And as long as they don't win in the south, they remain a pan-Hindu, Hindi heartland party rather than one that is also capturing the south in this one. So this is something we thought would look interesting. So not to go too much into detail, but I've already mentioned this one. And then if you look at the other factors that matter, and we looked at the youth, and I think this is a vote, what happened in Bangladesh, what happened here in Sri Lanka, what happened in Pakistan, what happened in Afghanistan, what happened in India, in many respects, it is the youth that are now driving the whole process of change. You cannot ignore this vote, and it is very important to understand what they want. And if you see how the votes have changed, and I'm sure you'll have similar issues, is that when we did the survey, the single most important factor that was determining the elections was unemployment. The second big factor was price rise, inflation. If you take a look and you combine the two here, I would gather that adds up to cost of living, which I think must be the #1 issue that you all be impacted with in Sri Lanka. And I would gather unemployment in some way, but a different kind of problems here, which I understand is a lot of people have moved out of Sri Lanka, and the impact of that, the vote of that particular thing, the numbers that come out from there, I'm sure they all get home votes. They all would vote at some point. What would be the impact of that has to be seen. So we did, the thing about that is we kept tracking these, and that's very important. We had the Center for the Study of Developing Societies that brings out a report, one of the largest reports, just before every election, not an exit poll. So you use that as a tracking system. We do our own Mood of the Nation poll every 6 months. And that is a more accurate account. We give a seat prediction. But of course, we didn't give a seat, we did an exit poll for the seat prediction, which went wrong. But we have been tracking the Mood of the Nation now for, we started this now 20 years, 24 years. 20 years to be exact. We started in 2003, 21 years. So that Mode of the Nation poll gives us the kind of, we ask these questions, and we do it in age groups, and we do it in religion, and we do it in caste groups. So a lot more scientific thing, apart from ground, we don't, I trust the journalists, they do a great job on the ground, they get a feel. My own sense is, unless you go to the field, you will not be able to understand the dynamics of an election. And I do it very often. I traveled across the south in this, I went to the north, looked at a lot of constituencies, chose the constituencies I wanted to report on, and had, as an editor, also got a ground feel apart from my team, my colleagues going across and looking at it. So that's very important. And if you go, if you look at some of the divides, and they begin to have an answer to it. The youth, for instance, highly disillusioned with the fact that they were not getting the jobs they wanted. And if you take a look at their own sort of, India's youth is 230 million voters. Okay, that's a lot of people. And if you take a look, that's 22% of the electorate. And they impact 97 seats, Lok Sabha seats. So anyone who ignores the youth will face problems, because straight away they're going to lose a lot of seats that they don't want to be losing. So I think that's very, very critical. And last time the BJP won a lot of the youth vote in 2019. It'll be interesting to do post-poll analysis, because many of the exit polls went wrong. What is the percentage of the youth that actually voted for the BJP in Congress this time? The findings are that they probably won a lot less than what they did. Last time they won 41 seats, the BJP in 2019, Congress 19. This time I think it's probably even Stevens when it comes to youth. And that was a constituency we see everybody's trying to woo at the moment. Moving quickly, we also did a very hard content. This is again, we wanted to treat things as not, so heavy. So economics, how do we do it? So we called it the hits and misses. And my colleagues in the art department came up with this fabulous idea of projecting the tiger on one side and the cat to represent the misses that was there. So the roar of the tiger and the meow of the cat, the soft meow. And so we did 10 very important, I think, particularly in these elections that you all have. I'd be very interested to know the scorecard of the Vikramasinghe establishment or the dispensation. How well has he done on the economic front, because that's the most critical front that's there. What is his thoughts for the future? So I would ask, and we asked all of them, what is your vision for India in the next 5 years? Where are you going to take us? Hard questions across every leader, so that their positions are known before you vote to them. I think that we owe it to the voters to brief them on the most important question that we have, which is this. Okay, I've got 8 minutes, let me. Right, and we then also focused on states, right? And again here, we used the Shivaji, the sword, he was one of our famous kings, the Maratha king, and this is the battle for Maharashtra. We felt also that's important to take swing states and do it in depth, rather than just do it as a general analysis. And since the battle had become very, very interesting, we were looking at not only the regional players, if you see, not only in Maharashtra, but also Tejasvi Yadav, who's doing extremely well. Of course, he didn't do that well when the final vote count came, but he was giving a massive challenge, and Mamata Banerjee, of course. And this was their big battle for survival, because we said if Modi wins this election, they are finished. The regional parties would have been vanquished, and that was a huge, for them, one of their biggest opponents that had held the BJP at bay all this while. So the regional players became very critical for us to look at. And I think increasingly, we all need to look at the women vote. For a long time, the women voters were less than the men voters. In India, a phenomenal thing that's happened in the last couple of elections is that the women vote almost equals the male vote. More women, in fact, come out to vote in many places than the men do. So we estimated that, I think the women vote, I have the figure somewhere in terms of percentage, we'll get that. But it was certainly, and why is that important? Because the entire government schemes that Mr. Modi had done were directed towards the women. Whether it was the cooking gas, whether it was the food grains that they had for their, which we have, India runs one of the largest free food grain distribution things in the world, probably the largest. 80 crore people get food grain free. That's, 80 crores, 800 million, right? That's a hell of a lot of people who are getting it. So, and the women are the main beneficiaries. They get, in fact, some states actually give them cash into their banks. There are a whole lot of programs that are designed specifically for women-oriented. That's the big thing that's there, apart from farmers. And so the women vote becomes very important to analyze how is the vote. And the problem, this way I brought the women up, is that when you ask pollsters what is the percentage of women that you ask questions for, you will find that they only ask 25 to 30% of the women. So if you see, all polls are male biased. Check it out. I'm not saying all, most polls are male biased in the sense women don't speak that much. They don't reveal their minds that much. And for whatever reasons, right? Ravia's laughing. I see Utkar, she must be checking out this too, but they don't, we all know, okay. But the fact is that it's very difficult to get, for various reasons, an answer. And that begins to skew all polls. Because now women have become such a decisive force in it. So it's something that you need to watch out, whether that's a phenomenon that happens in here. Then the religion factor that plays itself out. I was just looking at, for India, Muslims form 14%, and this had become a huge battle that was, one of the key constituencies that were being fought over in terms of their voting. We have 200 million Muslims in India, which is from 20%. If you take a look at the constituencies, Muslims form 20% in 86 of the 543 seats. So they have a very decisive vote in 86 seats. And in 16 of these are above 50%. So they have a straight chance of winning. But these are spread only across 4 states, mainly UP, Bihar, West Bengal, and Maharashtra. And if you look, there is no proportionate representation happening in India. We have only 22 Muslims in 2014, which is barely 4.3%. Went up to 28 in 2019, 4.9%, and is now down to 24 seats in 2024. So this factor began to have its huge impact as we began. And very briefly, I will tell you, this is what became the turning point of the election. And this was the battle for reservations. It surprisingly gave the opposition ammunition to diminish the entire BJP campaign, because one of the BJP MPs made this cardinal blunder of saying that these 400 seats that the BJP wanted was to change the constitution. And the whole emphasis was, the message that got across was to make a monolithic Hindu vote. They would eliminate the caste reservations, and because of the divisions in the Hindu society based on caste, I'm sure you all have that same parallels here, whether we take it wherever we go, I guess. But that was the turning point, because the opposition built in a case to say that the BJP's purpose was not above board, that the main reason was that they were going to alter the constitution and take off the reservations. And if you see the percentage of reservations, a history by itself, very quickly, close to 50% of the seats in government institutions and in colleges and jobs and everything else that you have is reserved in 3 to 4 categories, 3 main categories actually. And if you saw what happened in Bangladesh, it was the quota system, because of what they had said, that exploded and blew into Hasina's face, where they said all the ones who were the war heroes and their children, whoever fought the war, would get the seats. That is 30%. Here we have, by constitutional mandate, 15% goes to what are called the scheduled castes, 7.5% goes towards the tribals, and then because of the huge agitation that while we all were battling Prabhakaran, we were battling the Mandal issue. It's huge divisions across, it tore India apart. When the OBCs, the other backward classes, demanded a share of the pie, the Supreme Court then declared that only 27% would be given to the OBCs. So that totally only 50% of all the jobs in India would be reserved, the rest would be in the open general category. Now, there was a problem, because when Bihar came out with its census, they found that 65% of the votes, 65% of the people were in the OBC category, which meant that the OBCs felt that they were 65%, but their representation in terms of jobs was only 27%. We want a bigger share. Meanwhile, the government had also passed what is called the economically weaker sections, which allowed 10% more. So you had 60% happening in terms of reservations, and that became an issue. And to see the results that's there, you would see that things began to go terribly wrong for the BJP on that front. They tried to win back by greater polarization, bringing the Muslim factor and saying that no, the Congress and others actually want to reserve seats for the Muslims and therefore this is anti-Hindu, but it didn't seem to work. And finally, as we get to the end, this was Naveen Patnaik, who was one of India's longest lasting chief ministers, and we said, will Naveen make history or be history? At the moment, he is history. He's, he didn't make history, he just went down in the dustbin of history in some senses. Unfortunately, one of our, I'm not saying because I'm biased towards it, but one of our finest chief ministers who held the state and brought a different set of administration in his own style, caught by his own personality issues that happen. When you have a party that is built around an individual, once he falls, it's very difficult for a party to recover, as we saw even in Bangladesh and other places. And finally, this is the result that happened, which is the Indian electorate decided it would strike a great balance. And the outcome of that was that the BJP got 240 seats, well short of the majority that it wanted, which is 272, fell short of 32. The NDA and others barely sort of, they're trying to hit 300, very difficult. From their ambitious 400, very creditable that they win for the third consecutive time, but because they pitched it so high, you began to get the negative feeling of that, and this brought the opposition to one of the strongest oppositions. So to sum up, 3 or 4 factors played a very critical role in the way. The one was, of course, as I mentioned, the reservations factor, the youth factor. This was all kicking into unemployment and jobs. That was the issue. That was one of the biggest issues that played out. But let's not forget, the BJP won in a lot of states. It lost critical swing states, so their numbers began to drop. It's not like the electorate had rejected them, but it was saying we need a balance. There were issues that the BJP has to come to terms with, and I think that they are now working towards that. We have to see how they perform in their third term. They have to deliver. There are a whole lot of issues. We heard Prime Minister Modi speak about what he wants to do in his third term, and that's of course good to understand. So there are other factors that we can talk about in our discussions. I think I've completed exactly my half an hour. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Raj Chengappa, for a really insightful presentation. It's mind-boggling to see how an organization of your size and scale deals with an election which is of that mammoth scale. So I see a lot of new people, so I've just made a quick, very, very quick 15-point summary. Key things you talked about, which I think can be used in Sri Lanka: pivotal alliance shifts, political funding, power of visuals, analysis and use of statistics, state-of-the-art machinery related to that, swing states and understanding in depth, image of the leader and image of the party, regional parties as a phenomenon, the communal factor, the key districts, to focus on those key districts which are going to be the critical ones and to put resources in, other factors like Gen B and the mood of the nation, economic reality, economic vision, regional party analysis, women vote, religious vote, caste politics, and the personalities who are critical in each election. I think these are all things that we can look at in the Sri Lankan context and look at what fits and what doesn't. But
I just have one. I forgot. This one slide. I thought this finally a visual representation. This is how we depicted Modi when we looked at his this government. What we did was we pasted all the other faces. So he was no more the czar or the dominant force. There were so many other people around. Just sorry, I forgot. I missed that slide. So great. I don't need to summarize that one.
So we get on to a panel discussion. I'm sure a lot of you are bursting with questions. We are going to have a panel discussion. And after the panel discussion, we're going to throw it open for questions for the entire panel, including Mr. Chengappa. So hold on to your horses on the questions. Let's move forward. So we've got this really fantastic panel, and I'd like to introduce our panel. And as I introduce each of them, may I please request the panelists to come up and be seated on the stage. So the first panelist is Dilruchi Handaneti. She's an international award-winning investigative journalist, senior editor, trainer, researcher, and rights advocate. She's worked extensively across South Asia, both on-the-ground reporter and trainer, dedicating much of her time to working with women journalists in the region. She co-founded the Colombo-based Center for Investigative Reporting and currently serves as a director after ending a 4-year stint as executive director. She's presently employed as Monga-based Sri Lanka editor and writes a regular column with the New India Express. In 2012, she was Sri Lanka's she won Sri Lanka's topmost journalism award, which is the Journalist of the Year, and with which she works closely with media rights and human rights organizations, especially with the gender focus. So welcome. The next panelist is Salia Virakon. Salia is an experienced serial entrepreneur. That's an interesting terminology. Former corporate senior executive, columnist, and public speaker with 30 years in the Asia Pacific and Middle Eastern markets. He co-founded multiple ventures and held senior roles in major multinational corporations before pursuing entrepreneurship. Salia has managed multi-million-dollar P&Ls and advised senior political leaders, bureaucrats, and business leaders in various countries. An alumnus of Harvard Kennedy School in Public Leadership, he is a fellow of the South Asia Leadership Academy and the Society of International Business Fellows. As a columnist, Salia openly shares his ideas, connecting politics with his diverse interests and extensive experience. A non-resident fellow of Chicago-based Econ View, he's an Orange Tick best-selling author on Substack, and his columns are being published in many online news channels, print and publications around the world. I've read personally myself many of them on Daily FT. Salia, please come on the stage. The next panelist is Mr. Rohana Hetirachi. Mr. Hetirachi has more than 30 years of election monitoring and observation experience locally and internationally, specialized in Asia Pacific regional election monitoring and also Commonwealth liaison with election management bodies and other relevant stakeholders. He is the chairperson of Asian Network of Free Election based in Thailand, working with more than 18 countries across Asia. The executive director of People's Action for Free and Fair Elections, PAFREL, which was formed in 1987 primarily to observe elections in Sri Lanka. And they work for human rights, good governance, to uphold democracy. Furthermore, he's a member of the Governing Council of the Maga Institute of Policy Research Institution, established in 1972, and Governing Council member of National Peace Council, Vice President of Sarvodaya Shravadana Movement, which we all know very well ourselves, and a visiting lecturer at the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. He is the founder of the March 12 movement, which leads towards clean politics in our country, Sri Lanka. Mr. Hetirachi graduated from the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura and Masters in Sociology from the University of Kelaniya. Please, may I request you. And last but not the least is going to be our moderator and a member of our executive board, Mr. Prasad Kaushalya Dodan, a senior journalist and currently working as the Deputy Director of Foreign News and Head of the English and Foreign News of Sri Lanka Rupohani Corporation. He has professionally trained both locally and internationally, including at CNN International Professional Program, Atlanta 2002, and Asia Vision Attachment Scheme in 1998. At the same time, he's an Edward Murrow Fellow of the United States, which he obtained in 2008. Currently, he serves as a visiting lecturer at the Bandaranaike Center for International Studies, College of Journalism, and several other academies. Under his guidance, SLRC won many international awards for his contribution for Asia Vision News Network of Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union since 1996 up to now. Prasad received Director's Award of the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union, the award dedicated to the most outstanding journalist of the year back in 2022. Prasad, please, the floor is yours. And before you take the time and start the power. Yeah.
Thank you, Santosh. Thank you for wonderful introduction. And this Bollywood villain-looking man made, made a great contribution to make this event success. So he's the driving force behind everything because we were journalists. We were really busy with the election schedule and all of these things. But he was the driving force behind us. So with this thanking note, first I'd like to. I think my task has already done by Santosh, so I don't need to introduce the panel once again. But still, we have to dedicate our bulk of time for the questions because number of journalists are here, and I think as Santosh mentioned that team to ask questions, especially from our special guests. So without taking further time, I would like to turn towards our guest, Chengappa. Sir, that's fine. Okay. Right, sir. Now, you mentioned about many important points related to Indian election, and you gave some hints for Sri Lankan journalists to think about when they report our election process as well. Now, in this year, actually, when we think about elections, the year 2024, we can call a festival season for election, global elections, like Holi or Diwali in India or the Audhu in Sri Lanka. Almost nearly 4 billion people around the world, they go to polls this year. And most dramatic elections are happening. We saw what happened in India. Then in the United Kingdom, and what happened in Bangladesh after the elections. Now the Trump and Biden saga in the United States, the dramatic appearance of Kamala Harris. I mean, whole lot of events. And members of my news team are here. So they are always very busy with capturing all these things and reporting because very dramatic and very eventful year when we consider elections. But in Sri Lanka, this year's election is very special, right? Because in some elections, especially the presidential elections, we could see kind of light or kind of front runner. We can have some kind of idea when we touch the ground, the border base of Sri Lanka. But this year, all of us feel we are in a little bit kind of misty conditions, which never happened especially in the recent past. So you mentioned about certain points that how we should behave and how we should act during such situations. But now I'm going to go Pultos for you because very open question. Now there are a number of young journalists here also. We have a lot of experienced journalists, but still I can see young faces. So when we face this type of particular situation, how do we analyze this scenario and go for our reports?
In Sri Lanka?
Yes, of course.
Look,
You can mix with the Indian experience. You did some, but still.
No, I think all our journalists are, very competent. I don't think I have to advise, to be very honest, my Sri Lankan compatriots. They do an outstanding job, as I said when I spoke. And look, I may have been 40 years in the business, but I believe that you have to keep learning. And, nothing is sort of done and over with. The moment, Raghu Rai was one of the greatest photographers that we had. We did a lot of features together.
So
ඊළඟ
when I was
සැරේ දාන්න
traveling to
කරනවා
my very
වෙන්
young,
කරන් යන්නේ
and we were doing our first
නෑ
assignment,
ඒක
and he said,
Come on,
the
Karan.
moment you think you've made it, you're finished. So the effort is that we don't have the answers. That's the last question. The effort is, I think, journalism is a continuing university. Where we have to constantly learn, we have to constantly adapt, and not just from examples from India, but across what can we pick up. It is just like business, you can't be static. Today, it's in a world that is, so vastly complex in terms of media, that you can do anything across the spectrum and achieve a lot. Earlier, the entire media was controlled by a few, who then sort of, like the Pope or God, would dispense information down based on their, their standings. But today, media is far more democratic. It is far more expansive, and that I think is a great challenge. How do you bring, as you do, I had to, as I say, I was joking in the morning, old dog learns new tricks. In the sense, I have to do a video cast, I have to do a podcast, and so I have an audio show, I have a video show, and I'm writing. Right? That's 3 times the amount of work I would do even as a young correspondent. So as soon as I finish a story, then I do a video, then I do. Now, the idea is, I think you have to touch every medium across. And the stories you tell and the way you tell it, each medium has their own this thing, which I needn't time, we are all experts in. But where the real issue I think we have to be careful about is that when you had an established institution, where there was a newspaper, there was an editor, there was controls of checks and balances, accuracy, all those factors are very critical in journalism. The only thing a journalist has is his credibility. If his credibility goes, there is a trust and credibility factor. If your reader, viewer, watcher, listener doesn't trust you anymore, they shut you down. So it's very important that, especially as media becomes more broad-based, more democratic in its expanse, where individual people don't need an established institution to start off a blog, and they are highly popular, as we've seen in India, Dhruv and others who came and made a huge difference in terms of the way people thought. Journalists owe it to their viewers, listeners, readers, to present a balanced perspective, to find all points of view. I mean, these are the cardinals. That it's like, when since cricket is a favorite game and he said he's bowling a full toss to me, one of the, I'm not hitting you for a 6, okay? One of the cardinal things that when you listen to all these senior players is, remember to always ground your back when you're running. Don't run just like as though you are the star, right? One of the cardinal principles of journalism is that you have to follow the grounding of the bat, which is double check your information. Have you spoken to everybody? Have you got, if you're making a serious allegation or making a political point, have you done your homework? It's so easy to be sensational and get your numbers, and you say something that is so atrocious that people come, but that is always shocking. I always found that if you do your research well, you start learning first. That's why I said it's a continuing university. I don't know it, the presumption starts, let me know more. And today you've got fabulous opportunities, all of us have, not just Sri Lankan journalists, Indian journalists, is read, take all the data, crunch it, talk to as many people as you have, do the job a journalist traditionally does, which is to get the whole spectrum of opinion, and when you speak, you are reflecting not Raj's or her opinion or anyone, it is the opinion of a very distilled, curated opinion, so the viewer, reader appreciates and says, that person I want to read, listen, do it, because I know that person doesn't come with a bias. So I think the fundamentals of good journalism is very critical in all these processes. That's my message.
Yes, with that note, actually, you can ask many questions from him later. We are going to finish the first round of questions, then we'll open the floor for your questions. Then I'm going to turn towards Mr. Rohan Hettiarachchi, very busy man during these days, very difficult to catch him. And he actually came here after attending some other functions as well. Thank you for your contribution, Mr. Rohan. Now he has a major task of, with other organizations, monitoring and ensuring the free and fair election process in Sri Lanka. He was doing it for last 30 years, according to the introduction we heard. And Mr. Hoffler, now you have many areas to cover during this process. One key area is media. And yesterday when we had a brief chat, you mentioned about funding, and you are having kind of a new process of monitoring funding and preparedness or something like that. So could you briefly tell us about that?
First of all, thank you for taking me here. I think this elections is one of the important for these elections. The first time in Sri Lankan history, we are bringing this campaign finance ceiling. I'm sure that the Elections Commission had a consultations with the political party as well as the candidate yesterday morning, and probably they will bring the ceiling amount for one voter, and we have 17 million. So I'm sure that it will be less. I know the figure actually, but it will be less than 200 per one person. So, but it will be a huge amount, even if it is 200, calculating with the voter populations. So this time, each candidate should produce 2 reports after the election. One is their income report, all the incomes in cash or in kind. So they have to make proper report, and they have to make the note where they are getting those cash support or in-kind support with the names, ID numbers and the amount. And then the second report, they have to produce the expenses report. That also should include every single expenses and with the evidence within 3 weeks of immediately after the election. Within 3 weeks they have to submit this report. So the issue here is who can measure those reports, who can say whether it's right or wrong. So there is no mechanism in Sri Lanka, even under the law, they have not proposed any mechanism to the elections management body. So therefore we get together as a civil society, as an observers group, in consultation with the elections commissions, and also in consultation with the bribery commissions, human rights commission, Inland Revenue Department. So there are various actors in it, but basically the first time in Sri Lankan history, all the elections monitoring body, all in the sense the key, there are a few others also, but those who engage with us from the beginning, I think there are 6 monitoring organizations. We get together and we, how do you say that, it's a web tool to monitor this campaign finance. But of course we have to deploy the ground level observers. So we distributed the numbers among all the observers group. So the campaign can be different from candidate to candidate, and they will use the mainstreaming media, social media. Actually they have already started. The millions of money they have already spent. So we are not in a position to monitor that. Even if we monitor that, it will not count it for their campaign ceiling. So from tomorrow onwards, we are going to monitor the ground level, and it will, every organization, the organization's observers will bring their observations to the secretariat. We have established a secretariat. We launched it actually yesterday with the Elections Commission, or with their participations also. So everyone will contribute to that tool. So the original idea, I don't know how far it will success, because it's the first time we also experiencing it. So every day we will get a report, okay, what is the level of candidate A expenses, what is the level of B, C, D, something like that. So which we are getting from the ground level. It is not easy, it's a very challenging task. I think we need to support from the media also.